Alright, welcome to your final Greensock lesson. We'll try to wrap this up very quickly and then we'll move on to our final animation project, which I know you've been eagerly waiting for. So let's get into this CodePen very quickly and we'll cover the last few concepts that I think you need to understand as we build our final animation project. Okay, so if you look at this CodePen here, the URL is at the bottom of the screen as usual. You'll see that it looks very much like the last example, and we have the three logos all around the viewport, top left, top right, and bottom right. And I have a master timeline already set up, and I have three tweens that animate each of the logos in the same pattern that we've been animating them over the last several minutes. So no surprise here, I'll hit run and you'll see what that does. Okay, so almost exactly the same as the last one. There is one new addition in this pen, and I'll show that to you here. I have added, if I scroll down to the very bottom of this HTML, you'll see that I've added a new object called Big Logo, and that is essentially a copy of one of these logos, but enlarged to sit in the middle of the viewport. It's currently hidden, that's why you can't see it, but we'll use this later in the demonstration. I just want you to know that that exists there. And that's the only addition. So let's go back to the JavaScript. We have a master timeline with three tweens that work as expected. I want to show you some nifty features of the timeline. To help with management and just your organization, Timeline Max allows us to add labels to various portions of our sequencing. So for instance, I can add a label here at the beginning and just give it a fitting name like beginning. I can add another label right after the first logo has been tweened and call it something like end logo 1 and things like that. So what are these labels good for? Well, for one thing, when you have a long sequence of tweens and you need to offset them in various ways, it might be difficult to figure out exactly what type of offset or what's the amount of offset you need. It might be easier just to reference a label. So for instance, for logo 2, if I decide now that I want logo 2 to animate at the same time that logo 1 animates, which is right at the beginning, instead of using a numerical offset here, I can just use a label name. So now I've just told this timeline to start tweening logo 2 right at the beginning of the timeline at this label here. So it takes the label and says, okay, where is this label in the timeline? It finds it at the beginning, and then we'll make this tween start at the beginning. Okay, I hit run so you can see the effects. And now, as expected, logo 2 animates at the same time as logo 1. Even better, we can add offsets to these labels. So for instance, here in beginning, I can just add an offset as easily as this. Let's say I want, right now it starts at the beginning, I would like it to start maybe a half a second later. I can just add something as simple as this, 0.5. So I say label plus equals 0.5, and that means start this tween 0.5 seconds after this beginning label. I hit save, hit run, and you see that that's what happens. Rather than starting right at the beginning, the second logo starts 0.5 seconds after the first logo has started animating. So I could also do and logo 1, and I'll say minus 0.2 or 0.25 just for demonstration purposes. So now this will start a quarter of a second before logo 1 ends, and that's exactly what will happen. So I hit run. Okay, and if I change this to 0.5, we would have achieved the same effect as we had before. Right, so that's how to use labels and how to use labels with offsets. All right. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is another extremely powerful feature, and that's called callbacks. Now, callbacks are functions that you can trigger somewhere within the sequencing of your tweens, right? So for instance, let's say I want a specific action to occur after logo 2 has completed or has completed tweening. I can add something called a callback, or a handle to a function that should execute when logo 1 completes. And Greensock makes that very easy to do. They have an uncomplete attribute on the object parameter you pass in, and all you need to do is just point it to another function. And I'll just call this function show big logo. Okay, and I'll expand this window just a bit so you can see it more. All right, so now I've just said, hey, when logo 2 completes its tween, trigger this function show big logo. All right, so now we have to go and create that function. So I will create the function show big logo, and we can do anything we want in here. And in this big logo function, I've decided to reveal that larger logo that we have on our page, and that's what we'll do. So first we need to retrieve the objects from the DOM. So I'll call it big L, and we'll use a query selector for that, and I'll use the set method. You haven't seen this before. The set method is essentially a tween with no duration, which means it happens instantly. So I'll give it the target object of big L and just pass in the object parameter that we want. And what I want is for the alpha to be set to 100%. That's it. That's how to use a set. We don't need to pass a second function for the duration because the set happens immediately. Okay, so we've done that. If we cross-check our code very quick, we've created a separate function called show big logo. In that logo, I pull out the big logo object, and in that I set its alpha to 100%, represented by this 1. And this show big logo function is triggered after the second tween on our master timeline completes by this uncomplete attribute. Okay, let's go ahead and hit run and see what happens. And there, exactly what we expected. This gets triggered, this show big logo gets triggered after the second tween executed. Okay, I'm going to, just as my own personal preference, I'm going to remove this and add it to the last one instead. I think it'll be better if it reveals after the last one, the last logo executes. Okay, now hit run, and now it reveals the big logo after our logo 3 completes its tween. So fairly straightforward, right? Now there are several other callbacks besides just the uncomplete, as you may have guessed. There's also an on start, on reverse complete, and others. But I'll leave those for you to explore on your own. Just go to the documentation on Greensock's website and just search for callbacks or search for tweenmax. And if you go through the documentation, you'll find lots of information on their callbacks. So one other thing, or the last thing about callbacks I'll mention, is that I like the fact that we're revealing this logo at the end of logo 3. That works really well. I've decided that, you know what, when this logo gets revealed, I'd also like to set the background on this logo to a certain color. So I could decide, well, I could pass a parameter to this function called color, and I'll just change that in the attributes to be tweened to color. So I'll just add this fill attribute, which represents the color of our object, and set that to color every time this show big logo function is executed. Okay, but now how do I pass this color parameter to this show big logo function? Well, Greensock provides another attribute called Uncomplete Params. And that allows us to pass an array of objects or array of elements, which in turn get passed to our Uncomplete function as parameters. So in this case, I only need one. We only need one parameter. So we'll create the array here, but in that array, we'll just pass one argument. Now, when this show big logo gets triggered, it's going to pass this value into its color parameter, and the color parameter will set its fill. So I like orange. So let's see if this big logo's background gets changed to orange. Hit run. And exactly what we expected. So that's fairly straightforward, right? Let's try it again. This time I'll use, my favorite color, pink. Hit run again. There we go. It might be a little difficult to see, but the background is pink. Maybe deep pink. No, it does not like pink. Okay, let's go with, just stick with red. Okay, ooh, wow, that's a bright red. Well, you get the idea. That's how to use callbacks and callback parameters. So now you have all the knowledge you need to create this wonderful greeting card that we're going to create in the next module. So thanks for hanging with me this long. You guys have been great. You now have a slew of Greensock knowledge under your belt, as well as SVG basic knowledge, and there's lots of things you can do with that. So let's jump into the next section and start animating.